Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Oh, whoop, whoop, whoop. I know what my problem is.
Did your rain stop, Susan?
Good morning.
No, it's still raining this morning. So I think we're going to have another day of rain and then maybe it'll clear up tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, fingers crossed it does. That's never fun.
Yeah, the dogs are bummed out. They can't go outside.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Good to see everybody. Happy Saturday. Give it a couple more minutes for everybody to stream in. So I do see a lot of familiar faces and names, but just wondering if anybody is brand new to Get Set Up, taking a Get Set Up class for the first time. Okay, we're all upperclassmen. Okay.
Yes.
Scott, can you hear me?
I can.
You know, Scott, I missed your class entirely yesterday. Are you gonna do it again?
I did about 3 classes yesterday. So do you know which one it was?
The one that was at 2:30, the Google Photos
Oh, yeah.
number 2.
Yeah. That'll be on every week. So
Oh, that's on every week.
yeah.
I still don't. I'm using my tablet right now because I lost audio in my laptop.
Oh,
Nina tried to get it back, but she couldn't. So they reset my computer, so I can't do it in my computer. So I'm doing it in my tablet.
okay. Okay. All right. I think we are about ready to go. There may be a couple of people coming in a couple of minutes who might be a little late, but hopefully they won't miss too much. So thank you for being here. I'm happy that you are spending a Saturday morning here with me and with Get Set Up. My name's Scott, for those of you who don't know me, and I am here with my colleague Max, and he will be helping me monitor the chat for any questions. I'm going to be showing you a lot of pictures this morning, so I'm going to need Max to keep track of any questions that come in. I will stop for questions periodically, as well as comments, any observations you make about any of the pictures I show. So we'll have a good time this morning. Okay, everybody can see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, terrific. All right, so let's talk portraits. So just a little bit about me before we get started. So you know a little bit about your guide. I live in Silver Spring, Maryland. That is right outside of the Washington, D.C. area. And in addition to leading Get Set Up classes, I am a freelance writer and editor and also a portrait photographer. In fact, I'm doing a portrait shoot for a friend's graduation pictures later today. So it does keep me busy from time to time. And I really love being here on Get Set Up. I enjoy the interactive learning that Get Set Up fosters, and I love the community building mission. It's just a great place to be. And here at Get Set Up, we're here to help you learn all kinds of useful skills to help you thrive. We learn from each other. Ideally, we can see each other on camera. If you're comfortable with that, just creates more of a social connection. And that's one of our aims here at Get Set Up. If you would like to request a recording of the class, you can email us at help@getsetup.io afterward, and we'll get that sent to you. If you are joining us by live stream, welcome. Happy to have you watching. Best way to participate in our classes is to actually register for one, and then you can interact with the other learners and the guide, ask questions directly. And lastly, Get Set Up is not paid to promote any specific products. I don't believe I'm mentioning any specific products today, but just in case, we are totally independent and don't do any kind of advertising. So what I want to walk through today for you is how to use various approaches to compose your shots, how to work light to your advantage, which is really important, and how to position your subjects and yourself for really unique, original looks. If there's anything else you were hoping to learn today, I'm gonna just check if you want to drop that in the chat for a quick moment. I'm happy to answer those. Anything in particular, just let me know, and I'll be following along and checking there. Okay. Okay, so I'll get us back started. Okay, one other thing too, if you're expecting any kind of background noise at your location, probably best to put yourself on mute. When we stop for questions, feel free to unmute yourself. Just want to make sure everybody can hear clearly. Okay, so one of the first things I want to talk to you about is lighting, because I feel like lighting makes or breaks a picture, and that includes portraits. So I am a real fan of natural lighting, and it's often nicer than what you would get with artificial light, especially when you're doing shots indoors with a lot of harsh lamp lighting, things like that. So a lot of times what I try to do is really put my subjects close to a window. And even if the window's not visible, just to have that natural light streaming in really makes for a nice portrait. You can see here this sort of diffused light coming in with some curtains or blinds here or something. Same here. Sometimes you can get some pretty interesting shadowing when you do that. You can see here, this is an indoor shot. There's a window. You can tell just by the way the light's streaming in here. One side of this man's face is really illuminated. The other side is really shadowed. An interesting picture. It's kind of a little bit on the moody side, if you will. And here's another good example of one I've found. This one is a profile, of course, somebody looking straight out the window, a lot of dark shadowing everywhere except really on her face. That's an interesting approach to a portrait. And here's another one that works really well. I like this little guy. Again, a little bit of contrast with the shadowing, but sometimes I think that works really well for an indoor shot. And here's another one right by a window. Some nice light just illuminating his face and not much of anything else. So when you're shooting outdoors, it's good to look for even lighting like shade. A lot of times overcast days can also be really ideal for outdoor portraits. Here you see there's just some even lighting on this child's face. Same with this one. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to dull the photograph by any means. And you can fix some of that even in editing, which is a whole other class. But one thing that I like to do is to avoid really harsh midday sun, like noontime, 1 o'clock, even 11 o'clock in the morning. And I'm going to show you an example of this. This was a photo shoot that I did about 8, 9 months ago, before winter hit. And I met this guy. He wanted just a professional portrait done of some sort, just for a LinkedIn profile or something. So I met him in the mid-afternoon. Sunlight is still kind of high overhead at that point. And I didn't pick the best spot to start doing this shoot. And you can see here, for an outdoor shot, especially for something that, for the purposes in which he was using this, a lot of shadow on the best parts of his face, and a lot of glare here, and some uneven, just some speckled lighting here. It just was not well conceived on my part. But later in the day, yeah, I'm giving that a thumbs down. Later in the day, you're starting to get a little bit of that golden light. This was probably in getting into the evening. The light's getting a little more golden outside. It's still sunny, but you see it's sort of like this nice lighting back here, but his face is the lighting on it is much more even. This is one that I think would look great on a LinkedIn profile or a Facebook profile or something like that. It's very clear who he is. He's not squinting or anything like that. Here's another example. This is a family portrait, and this looks like it was one of the worst times of day to take that shot. And as you can see here, that everybody is almost white in the way that their skin looks, and they're squinting. The mom has to wear sunglasses. The backdrop is kind of nice, but it just doesn't work for me. It just really looks, it's not flattering to anybody in the shot. As opposed to this one, same family, but the lighting is much more even. I'm not quite sure what time of day this was or what the weather conditions were, but just looks much nicer. And I can tell you, I'm going to show you where it can get really disastrous. This is a photo from my wedding 21 years ago. And the photographer that actually, it was a wedding gift to us. It was a friend of ours that did the photography, but she never forgave us for the time of day that we did our wedding, because she had to do it was noontime, and she had to do these outdoor shots with all kinds of trees around. You see all this speckled lighting all on the faces. Just not a good time of day. And this friend of ours never forgave us for the time of day that we wanted her to take wedding pictures. Yeah. But it's also really nice to get outdoor lighting in the evening or early morning, even if the sun is really bright. It makes for some really interesting backlighting. Sometimes just, a lot of times people are worried about having backlighting on their subjects. And for outdoor shots, I don't think that's a problem at all. You see a lot of photography like this these days. So sunset, even sunrise makes for some interesting backlight, just kind of golden. And here you can see just some light peeking through the trees and all these speckles back here. They call that the bokeh effect, B-O-K-E-H, where you've got this nice blurry background, and it's especially really nice. And I'll talk more about that in a sec, but it's especially really nice when you've got some of this blurred light spots, I guess you would call it, in the back. And here's another good example, just some nice golden lighting in the background. And sometimes even artificial light can work outdoors. Here again is that bokeh effect, where you've got all of that decorative blurred lighting in the background. These are obviously some kind of artificial lighting, but you can't really tell what, because the background is so blurry, but that works okay. Neon sometimes at night can make for some interesting color cast onto the face. So if you're ever near neon and you want to take a picture of a friend or family member, don't be afraid to put them up against a neon sign. And you can also let yourself play. There's nothing wrong with breaking the rules from time to time for artistic purposes. So what I'm throwing at you may sound like hard and fast rules. They aren't necessarily. You're the artist. And here is a perfect example of an approach to working with not necessarily the most optimal light conditions to create something kind of interesting. You see all these light speckles on her face, kind of a different approach. Here's some indoor lighting with some shadows coming down that actually makes for a different type of shot. Here you've got the same approach. So let yourself have some fun, play, experiment. That's what this is all about, especially if you're taking pictures of people, you know, there's nothing at stake in terms of getting paid or anything like that. Some of the time that's what I'm facing, so I have to be pretty precise. But if you're playing around, play around, have some fun. Okay. So I want to stop there. I feel like lighting is one of the most important things that that you're looking at. I just want to see at this point if there are any questions, observations, comments. And feel free to disagree too if you don't like some of the points I was making on photography. Some people have different preferences, and that's fine. Any at all? Okay. All right. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Gail. Yeah, I do too. Okay. So let's talk about composing the shot. I think it's really instinctive for us to just always want to put our subject, the person we're taking a photograph of, in right smack dab in the middle of the frame, right? It's just the natural thing to do. But think about keeping your subject a little off center, like this shot here. She's just slightly, especially if you're doing landscape, it really works, but it also works with a portrait oriented photo. So you look here and this woman's a little off to the right side, and that is fine. You're not seeing a whole lot of what's behind her, but it's still, it doesn't take away anything in terms of the quality of her face and everything else. It's just a matter of creating a different and more interesting composition. You don't have to do this every time, but sometimes it's an interesting approach to take. Here's another example. This is quite an old photo that I took of my nephew and his then fiance. Now they're married, but this was their engagement shot. And I just sort of moved this slightly to the side, a little bit of a backdrop down there. This was at a public park. And here's another interesting approach where you're off center, but more from a vertical standpoint. So a lot of backdrop, more up at the top rather than at the side. And there are times where you can really go to the extreme, really put them to one side or the other. Yes, you have a lot of negative space here, and sometimes that can be really effective. So don't be afraid of that. Doesn't take you away from looking at the face. So. And if you are using a smartphone camera, you may have a portrait setting on your camera. So that, if you do, try using that a lot of times for portraits. You don't always have to, but it does help to get that bokeh effect that I was talking about. Digital cameras come with an automatic portrait setting a lot of times. And if you have some manual settings on a digital camera, a DSLR, and you want to play around with those to get different backgrounds and so forth, and more blur, you can try that. So there is an example of one where I did not use the portrait mode, or I did not, this one I did take with my digital camera, but I did not use a shallow depth of field. And when I'm talking about a shallow depth of field, I'm talking about essentially you've got the foreground really in focus, or the subject in the foreground really in focus, and the background really starts to blur out. So you'll see here that the background is pretty well in focus on this one. This was that same shoot I was talking about earlier. And, you know, this background is fine. I kind of like that stone in the background. It looks really nice, but just for experimentation, I did another shot where I changed my camera settings, moved him a little further away from the wall, the stone wall there, and you can see it's a little bit more blurry in the background. He's much more in focus. So either one of these approaches works. But, you know, a lot of times if you've got some interesting lighting in the background and you want it to get kind of speckled and everything like that, you can try those portrait settings. And I see here, okay, I'll just show this real quickly. This I did with a smartphone. And this is a picture of my niece I took last summer. And you can see here that everything is pretty in focus. I don't know how visible it is, but there's even some telephone wire back here that just sort of, I don't know, it just kind of takes away from the shot, or just makes it a snapshot essentially. So then I took a second one and I had my portrait mode on, and this is what I got. So you can see the difference there.
Scott, can I ask a question
Uh-huh.
about colors?
Uh-huh.
So I don't know if this is intentional or there's kind of general rules or not, but with the gentleman you started at the beginning with, where it was the high noon and all the lighting was all weird. I noticed his shirt was a totally different color in the one later on in the day. It was dark blue with the little pattern on it.
Mhm.
Is that intentional? Are you directing that, or did he just want to change his shirt?
He wanted to change.
He did.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So there isn't some kind of general rule like if it's very bright, they should be wearing dark clothes, or if it's
No, not necessarily that. I think with clothing, the thing I focus a little more on is not too busy of a pattern on the clothing. So if you've got a really loud patterned shirt, like
tie-dye.
floral or tie-dye, even tie-dye sometimes works, but say like a floral shirt, those are really popular with guys right now. Women are wearing a lot. I know, like, my wife wears a lot of really flowery patterns on some of her clothes, and sometimes that takes away from the face a little bit. So I usually like to recommend to people to try to wear something that's relatively flat colored, or just non-patterned, if you will. I mean, something like this, it doesn't have any pattern on it, like what I'm wearing, may not be the best color on me, but you know, it's kind of advising people on that. Some of those micro prints I think are fine. I don't think that takes away too much. And especially if there's something that's really in style, the person is probably going to want to wear it. But just for example, this afternoon, or late, actually this evening, this photo shoot I'm doing for senior picture, I told the person, don't really get too elaborate with your clothing. Just wear something really, plain white shirt, plain
Mhm.
black shirt, anything
So
like that.
they don't have a cap and gown?
No, they're not doing that. This is just for their graduation announcement. So yeah.
And then I noticed there was another picture. There was a couple with a tree, and
Yeah.
I noticed that he was wearing orange shorts and she had an orange scarf. It looked very coordinated the way that it was set up there. So I just was
Yeah,
curious.
that was their plan.
It was.
Yeah, that was my nephew and niece. I mean, it was their engagement photo. So it's several years ago, but they came up with that. So
Okay, I thought it worked.
yeah, it did. It
Cool.
did. Yeah. That was probably Kaylee, my niece. She's pretty savvy on those type of things. So
Well,
Yeah.
thank you. I was in a way hoping there was more of a general rule, but in a way it's more liberating if there isn't. But
Yeah.
it's just very, very beautiful. Whatever you're doing, even this last one with the her burgundy shirt seemed to really like offset the greenery of the trees.
Yeah.
Really, really great.
Yeah. Well, thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Kathleen.
Yes, when I've seen a lot of photographs when people are wearing the tiny checks and the checks don't come out, they somehow get blurred or they're really strange in the photo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Checks can really sometimes not work really well. And what do they call that pattern that has really been in style? It might be going out of style now, but is it gabardine or something like that? That is just sort of white and colored checks. And sometimes I think those can get really, really distracting. So yeah, that's another example where sometimes you might be better off just going with a solid color of clothing. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so the other thing, if you don't have the capability of doing those, if you've got a point and shoot camera, or you've got an older smartphone that doesn't have that portrait mode on it, you can always just look for a solid background. If you're doing an indoor shot, put people against a solid colored wall of some sort. This works really well. Again, you've got a lot of negative space here, but that works okay. He stands out real nicely, so this is fine. And here's another one. Just a white wall behind him. And you can also just look for really colorful backgrounds and put the person pretty close to that background, that wall or whatever you're up against. So here is a really nice colorful backdrop that I really like. I like brick and wood and things like that as a backdrop. I think if you find a brick wall somewhere, if you're doing somebody's outdoor portrait, this works really well. This is painted brick, but just exposed brick of any kind works as well. Here's a really nice one. I just love the color behind here. And this color works pretty nicely too. Just some stone, I guess. So one other thing that you can try to do if you're in the situation where it lends itself to it is to really bring in the environment, not just the person. But this is an approach like you might see with something that Annie Leibovitz, the photographer who made her name shooting for Rolling Stone. By the way, she's a big fan of the iPhone. She says she takes a lot of pictures with her iPhone, but But here is a perfect example. This is sort of starting to tell me a story or tell me something a little bit more about this person than just that they have long blonde hair or brown hair, sort of in between. It's putting them in their setting, and I start to think a little bit more about who this person is. She obviously is a musician, or I'm assuming she's a musician because she has a guitar next to her. I can start making assumptions. She's got a peace sign up here. She's probably a folk singer of some sort. I could be totally misreading who this person is, but at least it's got me thinking about more than just, oh, isn't that an interesting portrait of somebody? Here's another example. This is, again, people in their environment. They're out shopping. I don't know if this is looks like it's their greenhouse. And so you're putting them in a place where they love, and it tells more about them, not just showing their faces. This is candid, but this works. Here's one. It's not often you're going to find an empty restaurant where you can take a shot like this, but here I start thinking, okay, this guy may be waiting for a blind date. He looks kind of eager to see her. I hope she doesn't stand him up or he doesn't stand him up. All kinds of stories that can come into your head here, but it makes for an interesting picture. Here's another one. I start to think about, wow, where is this guy? What city is it? Looks like he's got an interesting balcony in his apartment. And even, it doesn't have to be with a whole lot of background, but even just showing somebody, relaxing in their home, reading a book, doing something else. So nothing wrong with getting creative. The person doesn't just have to be taking up the entire frame, essentially.
With that one, were you directing where she should look? Or-
Well, this isn't one of my photos.
oh,
Yeah, this is another photographer's. I'm sharing a lot of photos from other photographers, not just my own. So
I see. Well, in general, do you tend to do that? Will you give them like kind of instructions, or are you?
So I'm gonna get into that a little
Okay.
bit on the poses and everything else. So yeah, good question. In fact, here we are, poses. So when you're posing your subject, you want to try to keep it natural and relaxed. Some people are much more comfortable being photographed than others. I have a niece that just loves to get her picture taken, and she never takes a bad picture. So that really works out well. I have other relatives who I try to take pictures of, and they want no part of it. They just are not into it, and it shows when you take their picture. They don't smile. If they do, it's a forced smile. They look uptight. So, you want to kind of relax them as much as you can. If it's somebody it makes it a little bit easier. But I like poses like this. This looks a little bit relaxed. Whenever you've got and the smile is very relaxed. Doesn't have to be this ear to ear grin or anything like that. If you've got them sort of doing this or this, that's fine too. That looks really natural. These are some family friends. I took their family portrait last fall for their holiday pictures, and I think it helped that they knew me, so there wasn't any kind of icebreaker that needed to happen or anything like that, and they just kind of chilled, and it was a lot easier to do this. So especially if we are taking pictures of our family and friends, you're probably not gonna have trouble getting them to relax a little bit. Only the most camera shy people, I guess. So here's an interesting question. When I am under a camera, I just don't know how to do the poses and feel embarrassed. So I'm a little bit the same way. I don't like to get my picture taken, and I have a hard time really getting in a pose that I think looks good. Couple of scientific findings, or one scientific finding that I have learned about as I've gotten more into portrait photography. Number one is apparently people they seem to respond better to your portrait if the picture is taken showing your left side more prominently than your right. Why that is, I'm not quite sure, but there have been a few studies where they've had study participants look at a series of portraits, and they tend to really prefer the ones where the person is slightly turned so that their left side, I'm doing my right here, their left side is more prominent. We all have, I guess, a good side and a bad side, but this research was kind of interesting. The other thing is to maybe have them, if you can get just slightly above them, sometimes that makes for a really interesting picture. That kind of takes away from the discomfort a little bit. Sometimes it's not, any discomfort you're feeling might not be as obvious. Because the positioning is a little interesting. So I don't know if that answers your question, but sometimes it's the angle you take. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about angles in a minute, but sometimes that compensates for a lot of discomfort that becomes obvious when you're shooting straight ahead. Okay, so here are some other poses that are really relaxed. Another thing, Yeleni, if you can get, in a natural setting, and there are places for you to lean or just so put your back up against, or sit, or anything like that, where you can start to, you sort of naturally relax a little bit. Nothing wrong with that either, like this. This is my nephew and niece again. And it's also fun to just get people when they're feeling playful. And sometimes that means if you're taking portraits, you catch them when they're getting ready to get in position, or they're just sort of laughing, playing around, anything like that. These are two that I did. This is a niece of mine, and she was just kind of hanging out. She was actually along for a photo shoot I did for her cousin who was graduating from high school, and I took that. And I just turned around. It was raining. She had her umbrella out, and this is the niece that loved to get her picture taken. So it just worked out that way. This is another photo shoot I did, and this person was just a great subject to photograph because she enjoys being photographed, and she really knew how to be playful and fun and relaxed. And so don't feel like you have to just stand there. Do what you do if you're the subject of the photo.
Scott,
Yes.
I have a comment about your niece and the umbrella. The umbrella makes an excellent background. It cleans up the background quite a bit and
Mhm.
frames her face and her head. So that is a good use of an implement to help you with your photograph. And an umbrella can always be used like that, even if
Yeah.
it's raining.
Yeah. Especially even with close-up, that's a great point, Susan, especially even with close-up. Sometimes if you have an umbrella of some sort, you can just put that as your backdrop, and especially if it's a solid color, that can work really well. So,
Scott,
yes.
I also had a question about eyes.
I just saw that in the chat, Peggy. I was about to
I
answer
often
that.
have trouble myself closing my eyes. I've had that since I was a kid. And I noticed that with some other people, just the eyes. How do you get that to people to keep their eyes open?
That is especially challenging with group shots because inevitably somebody, like a family photo, because somebody's going to close their eyes. What I usually do is do some real fast repeat photos or put even my camera on burst mode and just take 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 shots right in succession with the hope that one of those will turn out where everybody's eyes are open. I mean, you can't keep people from blinking. It's funny, I did a family portrait once, and when I got back to edit them and everything, there was not one picture with everybody's eyes open. And so I had to do a lot of photoshopping to fix that, but you don't want to have to go through that hassle. So I would say, and this is something I should have done, is just if you have a burst mode on your camera, pretend like you're shooting wildlife or a football game or something like that, and let that go. People are still standing still, but they're not going to blink forever. So one of those shots should turn out.
So somebody once told me, like, count to 3 and then look up, or I don't know. I sometimes when I try to look up, it looks even more forced. And
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if there's a trick that, like, if you're taking someone's picture, I don't know when they're ready.
Yeah. When you're taking them, that's the approach I would do, is that burst mode. If you're the subject of the picture, I would ask the person to do that. Say, please take a lot of me so that one of them turns out. And the
Okay.
little secret that I will tell you about all photography, and that I don't know that it's a secret, but some photographers may not want to admit this, but Susan, I know, can probably appreciate this because I know she does a lot of photography. Sometimes you have to take dozens of pictures to get the one shot you're looking for. That's just the nature of the beast. Luckily, with digital photography, it's not that expensive to do that. Back in film days, I sometimes spent, a couple of $100 because I just would shoot over and over and over again, one scene or one person or something like that. Now with digital, you can shoot away, and somewhere in there, something's going to turn out.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
So you're making me think, when you watch those model shows, that's why when they do a photo shoot, they take a billion pictures?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Here's another one where you just kind of you're just kind of capturing people. It almost looks like they're getting ready to pose for this photo, but they're not quite ready. They're still sort of getting in position. And this, I think, works really well. It's just a fun family shot. And it's nice to add a little bit of a slice of life in there as well. So here, somebody's just playing with their dog. And so again, it might tell a little bit of a story, but this is really nice and it's very natural. Here's another one. Just catch people sometimes. I consider this a portrait, not just a snapshot. It's just showing this guy doing something fun. This is my nephew. Actually, he's my grandnephew, Lucas, on his first birthday, wearing his birthday cake. And, you know, I could have waited till he was all cleaned up and gotten this really nice first birthday picture, which I did get some too. But this one I framed. I just thought, you know, this is so adorable with the cake all over his face. And one other thing, you don't have to always have your, and this kind of gets to the discomfort thing too. You don't have to have your subject looking at the lens all the time. You can just catch them when they're not looking, or even tell them, look off someplace. Don't feel like you got to look at me. You know, here's another example, just nice candid shots. Sometimes they're posed, you know, sometimes I'm sure in this case, the photographer said, look at each other. So not always just a spontaneous candid shot, but they don't have to be looking at the lens. Here's a great candid shot. Just playing around, happy, laughing. Just try to catch people when they're not looking.
I'm sorry, and the one that previous one with the candid shot with the baby
one?
and no, the one
Oh.
yes, that one. So is that whole, I know you're going to talk about angles later, but it looks like the people are straight but the background is angled.
Yeah.
Was that digitally done, or is that the way the person is holding the camera?
I'm sure it was shot that way, and I would imagine that that was sort of an artistic approach that the photographer took, which is fine to do. You can do different angles like this all the time, just going for a tilt like that.
Cool.
Yeah. Okay. Again, just going for those candids. Here's an example. This one, I was getting ready to take his portrait. And somebody told a joke at the side and he just started laughing and looking at them. And that's when I shot this. And I really like this better than anything else I got. And we were talking about angles. You can look for unique perspectives and angles all the time. You can get people, you know, if you are standing on a balcony or something like that and can look down at your subject, that works. Same if you're below and they're on a balcony or some elevated place, you can try that. Bottom of the stairs, you can try. Fun to get kids from above, especially if you're very tall. This can work. I would have to stand on a big step ladder to get a shot like that, but. And don't be afraid to zoom in on the face. I think a lot of times there's this feeling that you've got to get the entire head into the shot, and you don't. One thing you might want to think about is really focusing on the person's eyes. I didn't do the best job of doing that here. I could have probably in the editing process, maybe lightened his eyes a little bit. But that's where you really want your focus to be.
When you say zoom in, I was reading an article that said rather than using the digital zoom on the phone, you know, that you should, you know, just let it move in, or like afterwards you can do the zoom after. I didn't really understand, but it was sort of saying you shouldn't use that. You shouldn't zoom in with your fingers, you know, like pinch it.
Not on a smartphone, because a lot of times you're not going to get the best resolution. So with that, you probably want to try to get as close to the subject as possible. And you can also crop too, to get a look like this. But what you really are looking at doing is just really trying to capture the person's eyes. And you know, the head doesn't have to be all in the picture, just the face. But yeah, if you've got a zoom lens, that always works. If you're using your smartphone, the closer you can get to the subject, the better. I know right now that's hard because we're supposed to stand 6 feet apart. But as the pandemic lifts, more people are getting vaccinated. I think you'll be able to do more of these. This one I love. This one is just bringing out her eyes tremendously. And that's type of thing I'm talking about there. So we've got just a little time to any other questions, observations, thoughts? Yes, Carol.
I wonder if there's like a study that showed kind of what you said, like how many of the photographers like take the picture on 2 when you're counting to 3, 1, 2, 3. I wonder if they get better pictures on 2 versus what everybody thinks he's clicking the picture.
I don't know of any research on that, but that's an interesting strategy. that might be something I'm going to try. So yeah. Others? Yes, Kathleen. Kathleen, you're on mute.
Sorry, I couldn't get to my mute very quickly.
Okay.
This is kind of an awkward question, but how difficult is it to, in your presentation, change the photos from presentation to presentation?
Not difficult. I follow a lot of photographers, and I have my own collection of portraits. So yeah.
It would. I think this is my, I don't know, second, third time. It would be nice to see different photographs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
With the angles again, is that like you would I don't know if this is the angles or saying left or right, that some people are more comfortable with the left side. I mean, is that something also you physically move, or is there a setting, like can you reverse it? Like, because I know on Zoom you can say reverse my mirror my image.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you can do that in the editing mode. I think it's easier just to do it when you're shooting the picture, but yeah, that's a possibility too. You can do a mirror image. Yes, Kathleen.
Yes, speaking of mirror images, if I do a mirror image, check mirror image on, and I see a mirror image, what do you or anybody else see on Zoom? The same mirror image or the non-mirror image, or how does that work?
I'm not sure. I think you would see the mirror image. What you would see in the mirror, that's what we're seeing.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, just some key takeaways here, and then I've got some stuff to tell you about things coming up on Get Set Up. Always be aware of lighting and try to make the most of shadows, light streaming into windows, things like that. Best time to take outdoor portraits is morning, evening, avoid midday if you can, or at least look for shade, or overcast days are really good for that. Position your subjects at different angles to get unusual captures. I didn't really get into that, but that one photo, sometimes tilting your camera a little bit, that's fine. Try to intersperse your posed portraits with candid shots that show your subjects just living their lives. So if you do get some exciting portraits that you've taken that you want to share, we would love to see them. You can just post those on Facebook, on your own Facebook page or Instagram or whatever social media you might use. And if you want to give us a shout out, our hashtag is GetSetup, and our Facebook page is @GetSetup. You can also always drop Liz on our team a email to let her know that what you've accomplished, and maybe sharing that with her, because we are always looking for people to showcase on our blog and our own social media feeds. When our learners really have some success with what they've learned on Get Set Up, we like to feature that. So don't be shy, let us know. Related classes coming up. We have a class on exploring your genealogy, speaking of family and friends, how to share your travel photos using Google Slides, and how to have fun with your family on Snapchat, which is another photography app. My classes coming up, I have one later this morning. In fact, in about a little over 30 minutes, on becoming a nature photographer. And this one focuses on landscapes. We have a series of nature photography classes. The other ones focus on flowers and close-ups, and then one on wildlife, but this one focuses on landscapes. And then Monday, I'm doing a class on macro photography, on how to really do extreme close-ups of tiny things like small flowers or insects, anything like that. And I want to let you know about a new feature we've got on Get Set Up. We are having a photo challenge of the week beginning this month, introducing your photos to other learners. You can we'll have a theme every week so that it'll be a specific item that you're photographing or type of photograph, but share the photos with other learners. Just have some fun. This is going to be very casual and social. You can get some feedback or advice if you're looking for it on your photos. You will vote for a winning image, and the top vote getter gets a prize from Get Set Up. So I hope you can participate. The first week one is going to be flowers or spring flowers. So submit your favorite picture of a flower or a group of flowers that you've taken in your garden, at home, at a local park, out on a hike, or even anything that you've got sitting in your home, like a bouquet or something like that. And to do that, you submit to this email address, and we'll get those all set up, have them on a slide deck so that we can go through them one by one. Love to hear the stories behind the photos. Week 2 will be birds. So if you have birds that you like to photograph, let us know about that by sharing. And we'll start this next Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern time, and we'll do this every Friday at the same time. So hope you can join us for this. And I also will have the information about this in the class notes I send afterward too. So that will include the link to the actual registration page for it with the email address there. So we'll send you the class notes with some takeaways, a few other links for you as reference. We'll also send you our feedback form, which allows you to rate the class, rate the guide, offer any suggestions that you might have about what might make the class better, what you liked about the class, and also a chance to provide us with some thoughts about classes you'd like to see us offer. If there's something you'd like to learn and it's not on our class catalog, please feel free to let us know, because we do develop most of our classes based on the feedback we get from you. And lastly, please spread the word about Get Set Up. We would love to host an interest group for you if you have one. If you have a hobby that you'd like to talk with other people who share that hobby, please feel free. If you would like to suggest a class to us again, you can do all of this by going to help@getsetup.io. You can also use that to request a recording of the session. And also, we do a lot of partnerships with state governments, with senior living facilities, organizations. So if you know of anybody who you think might want to partner with us, say an organization you're a member of, to deliver classes to a segment of the population, please feel free to do that, and you can let us know about that at help@getsetup.io. Okay, and with that, I will say thank you. And I do see a question here about special equipment for the macro class. No, you don't. This is something that you can do with a smartphone. I'm going to walk through how to do that as well. So, okay. So I really appreciate your time, and thank you very much. I hope to see you at another class real soon.
See you later.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Take care, everybody.
Thanks.